All set? Morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. In a moment, you'll hear from Mayor de Blasio, then you hear from Dermot. He's going to go over the September crime figures for us, and then Bob Boyce has 2 cases he wants to talk about. And then, of course, we'll take your questions. Just before we get into speaking about New York City's continuing downward trend as it relates to the overall crime rate, and just as Dermot's going over it, just pay attention to the shooting numbers and see where we are. Just I've been in this business a long time. I've been going to CompStat since 1996, and to have a year like last year and a year like this year, it's a tremendous amount of work by everybody in the city, certainly not just the NYPD. But I want to say a word about the massacre that occurred on Sunday night in Las Vegas. The thoughts of every member of the New York City Police Department, and I'm sure all New Yorkers are with those individuals, those families whose lives have now been forever altered. It's hard for any of us to comprehend how something like that could come to pass. And while we don't know yet the person's motivation for this act, we do understand that no city or town in our country is completely immune to such unbridled hatred. Nothing can alter the tremendous loss of life witnessed that night, but I want to point out one thing. The stories are starting to come out about how the acts of bravery, of heroism, of pure selflessness performed by regular people attending that concert. People who threw themselves on top of others to shield them from the barrage of gunfire. People who jumped in their vehicles and drove back to the site to help ferry the wounded to hospitals, and medical personnel and other first responders who put themselves in harm's way to assist the injured. Most of these people didn't even know each other that night. But these were neighbors helping neighbors, ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. I think it speaks very high of the character of our nation. And I want to commend the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and Sheriff Joe Lombardo. Their organized response to that active shooter, determining where the gunfire was coming from, and then storming that hotel room, knowing what kind of arsenal probably lay on the other side of that door, surely saved even more lives. I would just ask today, as you go about your business, tell your families and friends how much they mean to you, because we're all mourning today in the wake of this national tragedy. But we'll all get through it together, and it's together that we'll try to figure out why these mass shootings keep occurring and how we can stop them. And please, if you see a first responder today, or this week, a cop, a firefighter, EMT or paramedic, a doctor or a nurse, tell them thank you for what they do every day. Tell them you appreciate what they do for the public, what they, like the people in Las Vegas, do for others who they might never have met before. In the meantime, I want to urge everyone who lives and works here, everyone who visits New York, to keep coming out, enjoying the city, all the city this great city has to offer. New Yorkers do not make decisions based on fear. And as we move further into the fall and into the holiday season, NYPD will certainly maintain our vigilance. We'll never stop trying to achieve and to improve our overall mission of fighting crime and keeping people safe and making people feel safe. I'll ask, as I always do, that if anyone sees anything that looks out of the ordinary or something that doesn't feel right to them, call 911, flag down a cop, because public safety truly is a shared responsibility. We need everyone's help to keep pushing crime down. We need everyone's eyes and ears to ensure that New York City remains the safest big city in the United States. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I want to also speak about the situation in Las Vegas, because it's so painful for all of us to see this massacre that happened on American soil. And I shared the Commissioner's view. There was, amidst this tragedy, a lot of heroism, a lot of people who did everything they could to protect their fellow citizens and help in any way they could. Our hearts go out to the victims and their families. So many people now dealing with the aftermath of this tragedy, and they're in our prayers. I'd just like to ask everyone, I mean, this is literally the worst mass killing in American history in terms of one of these kind of shooting incidents. I'd like everyone to join in a moment of silence for all the victims. Thank you very much. So there is a danger that somehow we get used to these tragedies, and the number of them you've seen, the information has come out in the last few days. These massacres have become more and more frequent, and that is a very troubling reality in our country. We cannot become numb, and we can't give in. I read a column yesterday that by a very eminent journalist, James Fallows, that basically said we should accept the fact that this is the way America will always be. And I don't accept that, and I know no one up here accepts that, and we certainly don't accept it for our city. We have to keep working for the changes we need to end these massacres. They didn't used to happen, now they do. We've got to address all of the underlying issues. They don't happen in other industrialized nations. There are things we have to fix because we're losing too many people. Amazingly and tragically, in the midst of what has just happened, the United States Congress was about to entertain two pieces of legislation that would have made a bad situation worse. And even though right now they are talking about holding back this legislation, there is no doubt in my mind that in the near future, the congressional leadership will attempt to move it again. This is the quote-unquote SHARE Act, which will allow people from other states to bring guns that are illegal in New York into New York and would make our city more vulnerable. It's as simple as that. Example, assault weapons are banned here, but this bill would make it legal for someone to bring one into New York City and go to a hotel room with it and check in. Exactly the same tragic scenario we saw in Las Vegas. Literally a piece of federal legislation that would make it easier for there to be a massacre here. That is fundamentally unacceptable, and we need to fight it with everything we have. Shockingly, because the one place we should turn for guidance in how to keep people safe is our law enforcement professionals, and they will tell you, as I discussed with the leadership of the NYPD earlier, that one of the biggest dangers is allowing more shooters to have silencers that make it harder for law enforcement to know where the shooter is and address the danger. The SHARE Act would literally take away our ability to regulate silencers. We've talked a lot in the last year or two about ShotSpotter and what it has meant in terms of fighting crime and catching criminals. The more silencers are allowed, the less ShotSpotter can do to help the NYPD. That's just one piece of legislation. The second is called the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act. It's equally dangerous. It would let anyone approved to carry a concealed gun in another state bring it to New York City as well. And it basically subjects our city to the more lenient gun laws of a number of other states, gun laws that have been directly responsible for a huge amount of death in this country. And it allows these guns to enter our city without the NYPD's knowledge. I've said it many times, and every New Yorker knows it, the NYPD is the finest law enforcement agency in the country. They should have the right to know when weapons are coming into this city so they can keep people safe. This federal legislation would take away the NYPD's power to do that. So again, they may have been pulled back by the congressional leadership today, but they will not be pulled back for long. And we cannot allow the passage of time to deaden our sense of how dangerous these bills would be for New York City. In addition, and I just want to mention, because everyone's so concerned right now, and I've talked to my fellow New Yorkers in the wake of this tragedy, and everyone is feeling it, we do not see any connection between this incident and anyone here in New York City or anything that would affect New York City at this point in time. We've obviously have taken additional precautions, and the NYPD maintains always a high state of vigilance, but has added focus in some areas. But we do not see a direct nexus, thank God. We can, in the midst of the pain we're all feeling right now, take a moment to reflect on lives that were saved here in this city because of the work of the men and women of the NYPD. And as the commissioner said, the good work of more and more community members who are joining in partnership with the NYPD to keep people safe. The facts that we're going to give you about the month of September are outstanding. Crime continues to fall. Major crime down 5.3% from last September, the lowest recorded crime of any September on record. And we had the lowest number of shootings ever for a month of September, dropping from 108 to just 78 in the last month. Murders down 40% in this September compared to September a year ago. The fact is that the policy that was created by Commissioner Bratton and engineered by then Chief O'Neill, now Commissioner O'Neill, the policy of neighborhood policing and the pinpoint use of our officers to deal with problems, it is making a difference every single day in this city. It's also evidence of the fact that we can address crime everywhere. I know at times there have been analyses that say the NYPD, working with community partners, have driven down crime, but some places still suffer, and that's obviously true. But what we are seeing more and more is that we can no longer assume that there's any part of this city that we can't turn around. And this is very important. We refuse the notion that safety is just for the privileged few. It's for everyone. It's for folks who have dealt with the most adversity and for neighborhoods that have had the most violent past. We're going to reach them, and we are reaching them too. And if you want evidence, look at what's happening in our public housing. And we are here in PSA 4, and I want to commend Captain Patke and all the men and women of this command for what they have achieved, and obviously to all the leadership of the NYPD. Folks in public housing for a long, long time felt ignored, felt left behind, felt that the resources weren't there to protect them. They literally felt that they were left in the dark, and in some cases that was a literal statement. Parts of developments that were not illuminated, and there was danger that went insufficiently addressed despite the good efforts of the NYPD. And that meant that criminals could hide in the shadows and terrorize their fellow residents. And that was an unacceptable reality. Not only are physical changes happening, but neighborhood policing has fundamentally changed the reality. I've talked to so many public housing resident leaders and everyday residents who say the same thing. Having NCOs in their development, having officers that they get to know personally, who are there on a regular basis, who are ready to address any problem, no matter how big or how small, has changed day-to-day life in many of our public housing buildings. There's more to do for sure, but we can see clearly that big changes are happening in terms of greater safety for our public housing residents, and more will be coming. The physical reality is important. I want to thank our colleagues, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, who have done so much on this front, focusing on the physical needs necessary at our NYCHA developments. $140 million has been put into security improvements at the 15 developments that were the most dangerous. And literally brighter lights and more lights have been a big part of the solution, and they're making a big difference. Our public housing residents are being treated like every other New Yorker, and that's something they've deserved for a long time. And the results now are becoming clearer and clearer. In NYCHA developments citywide, major crime this year compared to last down 6.4%. Shootings down 19%. Murders down 40%. And here in PSA 4, index crime down 16.5% just from last year. And this is an amazing fact. There have only been 2 shooting incidents in PSA 4 all year. We've gone through 9 full months of the year, only 2 shooting incidents in this entire command. Again, some of you in this room may be newer to the city, but anyone in this room who's been here 20 or more years, the notion of this command having only 2 shooting incidents to date is astounding, and that is a real credit to the men and women of this command for the work they have done. So we see these strategies work, but I've said it before, I'll say again, there's no complacency. No one thinks we are done. We think we can go much farther, and we are committed to it in public housing, in neighborhoods that have borne the brunt of violence in the past, in every part of the city. We are the safest big city in America, and I'm telling you now, we will get safer. A few words in Spanish. Acabamos de tener el mes de septiembre con menos delitos en los registros de la policía. También vimos una reducción del crimen en viviendas de nicho, comparado con el año pasado. Hemos logrado esto gracias al plan policial de vecindad y la confianza sin precedentes entre el NYPD y nuestras comunidades. Seguimos trabajando para mejorar esa confianza y para que Nueva York, la ciudad grande más segura del país, sea aún más segura. Thank you. Over to you, Commissioner.
All right, Dermot will give you an update on September crime stats.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. For September of 2017, murder incidents in New York City, we recorded 20 murder incidents. That's down from 35 the year before. A deeper look at the 20 murder incidents recorded shows that 19 of them occurred this year. One was a reclass from 1986 from an incident. When you look at the 19 that occurred this year, 10 of the 19 were by gunfire. When you look at the homicides by gunfire, that's down this September, 10 versus 24 last year. Again, I've said it before, but the strategies put in place specifically aimed at repeat offenders and more specifically at repeat gun offenders is providing some dividends for us. In September of 2017, we had 13 out of the 30 days that we did not record a homicide in New York City, which is very positive news. And of the 19 that occurred this September, 0, not one, occurred on public housing. That continues the trend that the mayor alluded to that's been going on all year, where murders this year on New York City housing property are down 40%. That's 24 versus 40. Continuing on with September crime, rape, up 4 rapes citywide. That's 117 versus 113. With these preliminary numbers, and that's a 3.5% increase. Robbery was down nearly 15%. Felonious assault down 5%. Burglary down 8%. Grand larceny down 0.8%, less than 1%. And stolen vehicles down nearly 9%. That brings the total for September index crime, a reduction of 458 crimes. And it's an overall reduction of 5.3% for New York City. When you look at the shooting incidents, 78 recorded, the continuing trend of less than 100 each month in New York City. 78 is down from 108. That's nearly a 28% reduction in shooting incidents, and that's 38 fewer victims shot this September than last. And rounding out the stats for this September are transit, which also was down 11% in crime, and housing, which was up 1.7%. And that's the housing crime is dominated by felonious assaults, tending to be domestic violence. That brings us to the year-to-date and where we stand on crime through September 30th now. Overall murders, 203 versus 266, 63 fewer homicides, and that's nearly a 24% reduction as of September 30th. Everyone continues to be something that we strive and examine to not happen. We know that murder does not affect one person. It affects the family. It affects the family of the perpetrators when Bob Boyce's detectives catch them. And each one of those murders makes the front headlines, and rightfully so. But what doesn't make the headlines enough is the 63 that didn't occur. And that's 63 fewer victims and families, etc. this year. We're not done. We continue to see across the city what has set us on this path 3 to 4 years ago. Repeat offenders, recidivism, repeat incidents of guns, Just last week, there was an incident with a police officer shot in Yonkers by a gun offender caught with nearly 500 rounds of ammo, reported in the paper. We have still work to do, but our early rewards here are very promising. Domestic murders down this year, 38%, 29 versus 47. Not just gun violence, stabbing homicides down 21% this year, 45 versus 57, a reduction of 12. Continuing on with the other crime types and the index crimes for year to date, rape down 6%, robbery down 11%, felonious assault down 5%, burglary down 9%, grand larceny down 3%, and grand larceny auto down 12%. And DCPI will provide the numbers behind, the data behind all these numbers. That brings us through 3/4 of the year now. Overall index crime through September 30th, down 5.9%, and that's a reduction of just over 4,500 crimes. Again, we finished last year just over 102,000 crimes. We're about 4,500 ahead of that pace on the right side. Shooting incidents year to date. We've recorded through September 30th 600 shooting incidents in New York City. That's down 24% from the year before. 184 fewer shooting incidents, and that's with over 216 to be precise, fewer people shot in New York City this year. Again, 997 is where the final tally came in from last year, and that is going to be shattered this year. Down right now 184 shooting incidents. Transit year to date is down 1.4% in crime citywide. Housing is down 6.4%. Overall housing crime citywide, with great reductions in both gun violence and homicides. As we sit here today now on October 3rd, the numbers have gone even further down in terms of violence. As of midnight, we're down 186 shootings now, and that's a 24% reduction. And we are down 67 homicides, which is astonishing every time I look at that number, a 25% reduction. Again, 333, 335 is numbers that we came in for essentially 4 years in a row in New York City. We are on a 25% reduced pace this year, and it's nothing short of astonishing, and it's directly attributable to the efforts of the men and women of the New York City Police Department and all our partners. That's it.
All right, thanks, Dermot. Chief Bob Boyce has two cases he wants to talk about. Bob?
Good morning, all. In the 50 precincts in the Kingsbridge section of the Bronx, a week ago today, a male was shot and killed on Strong Street. Pedro Sanchez Almonte was shot one time, causing his demise, and another male, Fernando Castillo, was also grazed. We've identified the shooter in that. If you remember the case, Pedro Sanchez Almonte was defending his son in the street at about 6 o'clock in the evening. This individual, Zachary Brown, he's 20 years old. We'll put out his picture. He is a blood gang member. He has 12 prior arrests, 7 of which are sealed. Among the ones that are unsealed are robbery, assault on a police officer, and sale of narcotics. We believe it's gang-related. He's a member of the gangs. He's a blood gang member, as I said. We're seeking the public's help locating him. If anybody sees him, please call 911. If you know where he is, please call 1-800-577-TIPS. The second case I'd like the public's help with is a Queens robbery squad gas station robbery pattern. There are 6 altogether. This happens on Sunday, September 24th. 4 of the cases in Maspeth section, Middle Village, and in the 106 precinct and 115 precinct in Queens. Again, the same pair hit on the October 1st, this past Sunday. That is 2 males. They walk in with wigs, one carrying a gun, the other one on a cell phone. Most of them are all gas stations. However, there's one convenience store that hit as well. If you see these individuals, again, please call 911 immediately. If you know who they are, please call 1-800-577-TIPS. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bob. I think we're going to take questions now.
Police questions?
Dean?
You started with talking about the Las Vegas massacre, the horrible incident.
You don't want to talk about the crime stats first, and then we'll go into other topics? All right.
Anybody got crime stat questions there?
David?
On rape being up slightly, for years we heard that the main rationale for that was that there's more awareness, there's more reporting. Is that still what accounts for the uptick, or is there a law enforcement challenge in bringing that number down at all, whether it's flat or upsled?
I would agree with several of the points that you made. Just the year to date, we are down in rapes, just to reemphasize. When you look at the year to date numbers, down nearly 5%, nearly 6%. In September, the preliminary number right now is an increase of 4 rapes citywide. And to a couple of your points, it is a challenge. I would say what I've said several times before. Making some of these cases, many of them are known to, so it's not a case of finding out who did it. It's building a prosecutable case to the extent that the prosecutors are content to go forward with, based on all the evidence presented before them. So that's the challenge for law enforcement, not just in New York City. This is something that is experienced across the country. When you look at our rapes, we've said before, we break them down into different categories, and none is less heinous than the others. But we break them down into domestic rapes, we break them down into not domestic but known, and then the stranger rapes. We keep very detailed statistics on all 3 across the city to look for variances and to redeploy accordingly. But the sexual offenses are a challenge, continue to be a challenge, but I'm confident that everything that we can do, we are doing at this point in time, and look forward to reducing them.
David.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned, among other things, that the neighborhood policing program is, you credit with having helped to bring down crime in the various precincts. I wonder if you're at all concerned that by linking the crime stats so closely to that program, if crime were to go up, it would then create public sentiment against that program.
I can imagine any scenario, but I, based on everything I've seen over 4 years, believe crime is going to keep going down. And the impact of neighborhood policing is so clear to me in terms of the better flow of information to our officers, including information that allows them to solve crimes and even stop crimes before they happen. The greater respect between police and community it has engendered. The change, I was asking, for example, some of our precinct leaders in the last few days how vertical patrols are handled now versus the past. And now NCOs are a part of preparing for vertical patrols and implementing a vertical patrol, meaning that someone who knows the residents personally is involved, which changes the whole approach, both in terms of efficacy, getting at where the real problem areas are, but also the sense of the residents that the police are working with them and respecting that it's their home, and the vast majority are good, law-abiding people. So there are many benefits to neighborhood policing, some of them intangible, many of them tangible. And we're going to, as we've said before, we're going to keep studying it systematically to look at all the effects. But no, to answer your question, no, I do not fear that scenario. 1, because I believe crime will keep going down. 2, because if there were some variations over time, I do not think for a moment New Yorkers would miss the value that has been created by having that deeper relationship with their police officers.
This is something you think would be effective even in a high crime era. This is something that could help to turn the tide even if crime were high.
We're in, Terry, if I'm wrong, let me know. We're in 51 of 77 precincts now. And as you know, we started out in the 100, the 101, the 33, and the 34. And then we went to the 40, the 44, the Bronx, the Brooklyn North, parts of Brooklyn South. So this is throughout the city. And in the course of my day, I have the opportunity to talk to many police officers. And I think it was 2 weeks ago, I went up to the 44 and I spoke to 3 NCOs and the NCO sergeant. And it was even better than I could have imagined, their level of commitment to the people that live in their sector. There's true ownership now, and they understand the concept of discretion. So while in individual precincts there might be ups and downs, because we're talking about very low numbers here, that doesn't take away from the fact that this is about building relationships and building trust, which we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years. So this is, in the long term, this is the way we need to go.
And David, one last point. God forbid there was an uptick or some part of the city where there was an uptick. I think it in many ways becomes even more crucial, because if there is an uptick, there's a reason, right? Maybe it's gang activity. Maybe it's a particular pattern. Our chances of getting all the information we need are maximized by having the NCO approach. So it's not, if you're concerned it's something that only works in the best of times, I would argue its efficacy will be equally powerful even if we have some tougher times. But I think it's because of neighborhood policing that we're not going to see those tougher times.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if, and sorry if I've missed this over the last week, but I'm wondering if you have any data on weapons seized in schools for the first month of the school year through September. I know it's not a full month, but do you have any data on weapons seized in schools?
All right, so we're moving off of crime. Brian?
Okay, Brian, you have any information?
Chief Conroy from School Safety.
Okay, and this is as of October 1st. This year so far we recovered 328 weapons. Last year at this time was 222. So we've seen an increase, that's 48% increase, or an increase of 106 weapons. So this is something that we've said has been a trend over the last few years, and something we're working hard to try to turn back around.
So I wanted to ask about that trend, and on one hand, you might think that that means that everyone's doing better at finding the weapons. On the other hand, you might think more students are bringing weapons to school. Do you know which it is, or how you are thinking about that?
Well, I'm going to start as the layman here on the panel. It is a tragic truth that for generations, a number of young people have brought weapons to school. What I appreciate about this report is that we're getting more and more of them. Now, you're absolutely right to say, does it tell us other things? And I'll let the professionals speak to that. But I think there is an important parallel here. School safety has followed the same trajectory operationally related to neighborhood policing. They've done a variation of it in schools. They've been trained differently, supported differently to build closer relationships, first of all, with the educators, because it's not a state secret that there was for a long time not enough communication and shared strategy between NYPD and DOE. So to bond them into a single unit wearing, if you will, the same uniform has been important. And second, to a different kind of relationship with parents and students. More dialogue, more efforts to get information, again, that can stop things from happening. Chief, you'll help me on this. I believe a very substantial number of the weapons seizures come from tips you get from students. Obviously, they give those tips very carefully to officers, but that they feel comfortable telling an officer or an adult in the building if they see something. Could you speak to that?
Sure. And obviously our metal detectors are an important part of finding weapons, but they're only in 6% of our school buildings. So we do rely on the cooperative effort between school safety agents, teachers, the principals, and the students to identify those other weapons. So over 50%, 57% last year, our weapons were recovered through non-scanning schools, through cooperative working relationships with everybody in the school community.
If I could just give a little context too it doesn't stop at the school door. So when you look at those school-aged children in the context of overall crime, it's difficult to say, are we better at catching the weapons or are they bringing more in? But when you examine that age group and what's happening on the street in the context of the overall New York City crime, we see robberies of school-aged children down. When you examine the homicides and the shootings on both sides of the gun, which it tends to be by a firearm, those age groups are dramatically down. So there is a lot of positive, whether you're talking 10 to 17 years old, whether you're talking 18 to 24, being shot, being arrested for shootings, overall context of dramatic crime declines. Different to siphon out whether more kids exactly are bringing weapons to school, but it's just important to note that there's more than just the weapons, it's the overall crime picture, and it certainly goes outside. And when we examine the big picture, a lot of positives. One is too many when you look at one of these tragic incidents. But as I said, there's 63 that never even happened this year, and that needs to be told too.
Yeah, Rocco.
Chief, the murder in the Bronx that you referenced at the beginning of your remarks,
the gang-related angle, is that an issue with the kid being forced into a gang or them trying to force him into a gang?
There was a dispute, the fact that he was in the neighborhood and it was going back and forth with some of his friends. We're not saying he's a gang member, the son, but the person that we did identify is a gang member. We believe the persons with him were gang members, but not the son and his friends, his side of the issue.
On the case involving the allegations against the two broken detectives, have they been arrested yet? And if not, are you able to explain why? Our understanding is that at least one of them was identified in the lineup by two independent people.
So, as you know, it's an ongoing investigation. We have a sergeant modified and the two detectives are modified, and our IEB is working closely with the Kings County DA's office.
Given what happened in the Bronx last week and parent concerns and the increase in weapons that you're finding, do you think that there should be an increase in manpower in terms of school safety officers? And how do you feel about a suggestion made by a parent yesterday that maybe auxiliary police could be deployed to some schools as a form of deterrent?
We appreciate the input, but most of the auxiliaries, this is volunteers. Most of them have jobs they do during the day, so I'm not sure how that would fit into the schedule. I mean, our goal is to not only make people feel safe, but to keep people safe. And after last week's tragic incident, I can see why people can be concerned. But as far as the number of people in school safety, that's something I talk to Joanne Jaffe, Chief Jaffe, and Carlos Gomez and Brian. We talk about deployment all the time, and if there are certain schools where we need to boost deployment, we do. So that's an ongoing decision that we make. Yep.
Is there any consideration of expanding the use of metal detectors in city schools, and what decisions, if any, have been made about permanently placing metal detectors at that particular school?
So let me start and then let the experts weigh in. In terms of that school, those metal detectors will be there for the foreseeable future. We do not have an end date for them. In terms of the overall situation, the policy that we have implemented stands that a school community, if they believe there is a need for metal detectors, can initiate a process with school safety. Obviously, at any point, school safety can undertake that process directly with the school community itself. But we continue to believe that school safety, NYPD, is the best arbiter. Any decision on metal detectors is made with the ultimate sign-off of the NYPD, whether to add them or remove them. And I also think it's important to remember that many, many parents, and this is a really human and important reality for parents all over the city. Many parents, their number one concern is their child's safety, unquestionably. But if they believe metal detectors are not necessary, they do not want their children going through them. Educators will tell you this too, that per se, the experience of a young person going to get their education in the morning and having to go through a metal detector every single day comes with real problems. So the bottom line is, any school community can put forward a plan, but the ultimate arbiters, in addition to DOE, of course, the ultimate arbiters will be the NYPD.
Hey, Brian, just want to talk about how scanners are deployed?
So this is an ongoing process, as the mayor mentions, that we look at all the time, working with our partners in the Department of Education and also working with individual school principals and their administration to determine where the need for scanners are to be, or if we need to, we can take the scanning machines out or just change the level. So in addition to the permanent scanners that are in the school, we have the ability to go to any school on any given day and do scanning there. So that's an important part of what we do. If there is a incident that may only be a one-time or something that we get information that there might be something going on in a school, we have the ability to put scanning equipment in that school for the day, a middle school and or a high school.
Lisa?
Chief Conroy, on the school safety, you said 328 weapons seized this year, so that's just basically the month of September through October 1st? And then is there a number?
Well, I actually go back. I go back. We start the school year on July 1st. So, and that's from July 1st to October 1st.
And then in terms of incidents, is there a number on incidents?
We're only speaking about the number of recovered weapons.
So you don't have statistics on incidents like stabbings or fights or anything like that?
We could provide that after, but that's what we're talking about in this particular thing. We're talking about recovered weapons.
Dean?
If I can ask about the Las Vegas case, you started out by saying, unfortunately, no city is safe from this sort of unbridled hatred. We have these kind of concerts or big events in New York City all the time. Times Square, Central Park, Columbus Circle. If something were to happen like this here, how could the NYPD respond? Do you have helicopters with infrared that can spot somebody in a building? Do you always have sharp shooters up at big events like this?
Sure. Chief Gomez will give you the patrol side, and John Miller will talk about what we do with private security. What happened in Las Vegas is an absolute tragedy. I think as we all woke up yesterday and we listened to the radio or turned on the TV, it just kept growing and growing, and at points it became unbelievable, but it has to be believed it happened. So we do a very good job at policing large events, but let me let Carlos go into what we do at the large events, and then John will talk about how we work with private security. Carlos?
Yes, Dean. We routinely utilize counter-sniper teams and observation teams at many of our large events. These are officers from the Elite Emergency Services Unit. They're perched on rooftops, balconies, or windows up in the buildings. We often supplement that deployment with officers from patrol and rooftops to serve as extra sets of eyes, as well as, and you said our aviation unit is assigned to many of our large details, and they're seconds away from wherever they are in the city. And sometimes they're assigned to that specific detail where they hover above. And we cover many of our large events with these resources, large parades, the Christmas tree lighting, which is coming up, and many parades are still ahead of us. Certainly New Year's Eve, and you left out the Yankee game tonight. Tonight up in the Bronx, we'll have observation teams, we'll have counter-sniper teams, as well as more resources and more heavy weapons teams. And John's going to speak in a few moments what he does with the security staff, how we train not just security staff, but their housekeeping staff. But in light of what happened in Vegas, we're certainly going to take a closer look at this and see what else we could do to make these events safer. And, I left out the U.S. Open, and I also left out concerts. We deploy observation teams and counter-sniper teams in some of the concerts we have inside our stadiums.
As Carlos said, we're going into our big event season. We go from the New York Marathon to the Thanksgiving Day Parade to the Christmas tree lighting to New Year's Eve. And in between, we have what would be a large event in another city, whether it was yesterday's concert in Times Square or Friday's. So each one of those gets a complex counterterrorism overlay, a lot of which you see because you cover them, some of which you don't see, it's in the background. Some of that involves the training program run by the Counterterrorism Bureau, where 9,900 cops, so in the next two classes it'll be 10,000, have gone through active shooter tactics training. That has been focused largely on the patrol forces in uniform. These are going to be the people who are going to get the call first and get there first. Beyond that, in the background, as Carlos mentioned, the Intelligence Bureau has the hotel team. They are specialized. Their job is to make and maintain contact with the hotel security directors. What they also do as part of Project Nexus, which is a public-private training program we deploy with private industry, is we give them specialized training on recognition of suspicious activity on the parts of guests, recognition of explosive precursors. What do those look like? This week we have added to that recognition of what everybody knows what a rifle looks like, but what does a gun case look like as opposed to a golf bag or regular luggage? So we've added that in, and we're going through a new round of training. This training occurs relatively often because of the turnover in those jobs. We don't focus just on the security people, but also the key housekeeping staff. Those are the people who are in and out of the rooms who have the best observation ability to spot something suspicious. On the active shooter training, it's not just the cops who receive the training. Under the SHIELD program and the Counterterrorism Bureau, we've trained over 57,000 civilians in private sector groups, companies, houses of worship, you name it. And the media has been through this training as a group too. in what to do if you are caught in an active shooter situation based on the principles of run, hide, and fight. But we give them specific tools and tactics and things to think about. So that is kind of an overview of what we've been doing for the past number of years and building on.
Follow up on what Chief Gomez was talking about at Yankee Stadium with the counter snipers. To what degree is there fresh concern outside the security area? You've got thousands of people who line up on 161st Street. They haven't been wanded yet. And you've got subway platforms and buildings up above. To what degree does the Vegas incident open up this sort of potentially fresh weakness?
It's not just the Vegas incident. If you look at what happened in Manchester, so I talk about all the time. We can't just be concerned about what goes on here or in the state. It's got to be nationally, internationally. Of course, it's of great concern, and we deploy, we change our tactics as necessary. Carlos went through everything that we do, and there's more that we do also. And a lot of this has to do with the intel that's derived also. And again, it can't just be the NYPD. It's got to be however many people are going to Yankee Stadium tonight. What is it, 50,000 people? You got to pay attention. Maybe take your headphones off. Look around. If there's something that doesn't look right, it's up to you to flag down a cop or make that call to 911. You got to pay. We're living in today's world in 2017. Each and every New York has to pay attention to what's going on around them.
But Andrew, I'd also remind you, we have overwhelming force at these events. I mean, yes, there are all sorts of different angles to be concerned about. I think NYPD does an extraordinary job of taking them into account. But one thing I think makes us different is when you go to a major public event like a playoff game tonight, you're going to see a huge number of NYPD officers, including all of our anti-terror forces. Anybody who in any scenario would ever mean harm is going to see a whole lot of firepower around.
Yeah.
Mayor de Blasio, isn't the tragedy in Las Vegas compounded by the fact that the status of American politics, such as it is in Washington, is that body count could have been any number.
Sure could.
Could have been a couple of thousand. And we'll have commentators that will say this is the price for freedom.
Look, it's the point I was making earlier. I don't accept that this is an unmovable situation. I think we're in a very dynamic time, socially and politically. And I believe that everyday Americans look at a situation like this and they understand it's unacceptable. And it is because of failings in our laws. And there's other things we have to talk about too, obviously. Trying to do a better job of identifying when people have mental health challenges and treating them earlier. There's all sorts of factors. But the number one problem is the availability of weapons. And the arsenal this individual had is breathtaking. It's incredibly troubling how much he could have kept doing. So, no, I don't think this is an unmovable situation. I think everyday people in this country want sensible gun safety legislation. They do not believe anyone should be able to walk into a store and get an assault weapon or all the ammunition they want for something that's obviously meant to harm human beings.
Wasn't this after Newtown, though, sir?
Sure it was. And I was depressed as anyone else that there wasn't more action after Newtown. But I also think, hold on one sec, I also think the political process is cumulative. We've seen it on many, many issues where the conventional wisdom was something was unmovable, and then it started to move a little. It shouldn't take more tragedies. Let me state the obvious. We've gotten all the evidence we need. In fact, I fear we're becoming numb to it. But that being said, I have eyes to see when the majority is moving. The majority wants change.
Two more on police, so I get them to move on, all right?
Zolan.
Mayor, you met with James Blake in 2015 after an officer was accused of tackling him on 42nd Street. That officer filed a lawsuit against James Blake yesterday, citing a book that he wrote, saying that he was using racism in that book as using his celebrity to wrongfully accuse the officer of being racist. I'm wondering if you have a comment.
No, I haven't seen anything about that lawsuit. I don't know anything about the book. At the time, the discussion was about trying to do some fundamental things to improve the relationship between police and community, and that was a worthy discussion, but I haven't seen what's happened since.
Do you believe the officer should lose vacation days?
I'm not getting into internal discipline for NYPD. That's up to the commissioner.
Next is Zolan.
Commissioner, just want to get your thoughts on
story that was on the front page of the Post yesterday about cops in the 42nd precinct saying that they're kind of taking a hands-off approach to lawsuits.
So I've been at this job now for a little over a year. Chief Monahan's going to talk specifically about the 4-2. But in light of what happened on Sunday night out in Las Vegas, I thought it was particularly misguided to have that story and to have the subsequent editorial as to what's going on in the 4-2 precinct. I've been a cop for 34 years. I know why people become cops. There are ebbs and flows to what we do. There are good times. There are tough times. And that happens in each and every precinct, not just in the police department. So for me to sit here and believe that all of the courageous men and women in the 4-2 precinct are put off by drug dealers taunting them goes beyond belief. So Terry's going to talk to you specifically about what's going on in the 4-2, what we're doing proactively. And I know there is an increase in shootings, but that's not necessarily reflective of the morale of the men and women of the 4-2. Terry?
I take umbrage to what was said to the. I take umbrage to what was said to the cops of the 4-2 because they're out there doing a tremendous job every day. To say that they're afraid to do their job is an insult to the great men and women that are there. And if you look at the 4-2, and if crime itself is down 8.8% over the last 28 days compared to the city that's down 5.1%. If you look at arrest in the 4-2 over the 28 days, up 2.7%, while it's down 9.6% in the rest of the city. More importantly, take a look at gun arrest. These are cops that are going out there facing the danger, taking guns off the street of the people of the 4-2. Up 22% for the 28 days in the 4-2 precinct, up 24% for the year. When we look at the city, they're down 2.4% for the 28 days and 2% for the year. Just last Wednesday, cops in the 4-2 responded to 167th Street and Boston Road to a shots fired job. 2 gang members shooting at one another. They respond, they go out, they investigate, they find someone that matches the description. They grab him. They investigate further. They go into the building, grab a second guy in the building, recover the gun. Work closely with the detectives in the 4-2 to build a case, exactly what we talk about. Pick up video on the street, showing the man running down the street with the gun in his hand, showing the original fight that took place. That is not evident of a command that's slowing down. That is not evident of a command that its cops are not engaged or are afraid to take police action.
The essence of the story was that they're... Speak up. I was saying, I think the essence of the story was that they're afraid of, lawsuits, and their contention was that they feel that the city is too quick sometimes to settle.
The story obviously was based on a political agenda and on falsehoods and on no effort to do real research. And that is the norm at the New York Post. And I'm just surprised that people keep trying to make us think that we're going to accept unnamed sources giving falsehoods as real information. You just heard facts from the chief. That's what's really happening. So the premise of the story is inaccurate to begin with. To the question of how we're addressing frivolous lawsuits, we made very clear and very public, I think it was 2 years ago, that we are going to fight any attempt to inappropriately bring a lawsuit against our officers. In the past, the city, as a matter of quote-unquote doing business, would allow those lawsuits to move forward and settle them in too many cases. We have chosen now to put additional legal resources into fighting them every step of the way, and it's causing a reduction in those frivolous lawsuits. And I think it's something that our officers can see. But the premise of the story is idiotic and unfair to our officers because they're doing extraordinary work.
Can you walk us through what happened before the alleged rape in Brooklyn South? Why those 2 detectives left the blind bust operation they went on?
Yeah, we're in the middle of an investigation with Internal Affairs and the Kings County DA's office. I'm not going to talk about the specifics of the case.
Just to follow up on that.
Sure.
Commissioner, do you have any concerns about narcotics units more broadly, about the conditions of the supervision in them that would allow something like this?
I have concerns any time that an allegation of this nature rises. If this is true, if this happened, we do tremendous work in the NYPD, and if this case turns out to be that it actually happened, then again, goes to the trust we've been trying to build over the last 3 years. So I'd be extremely disappointed. And I said, and you know me, it's almost 13 months now. Not all 36,000 cops deserve to wear their shield around their neck. And if these two detectives did something wrong, then they'll pay the price.
Commissioner, or maybe for Commissioner Miller, regarding what happened in Vegas, when there's new construction in the city, whether it's a hotel or an office building, are there recommendations made, not just as far as street level, but in terms of bullet-resistant glass or windows that don't easily open? Is that a recommendation that's made to ownership, and how successful have those talks been?
Yeah, John can go into it a little deeper, but this is part of the work our counterterrorism unit does.
So, Rocco, the Counterterrorism Bureau looks at buildings that are government buildings, iconic targets, things like the World Trade Center, but not every building in the city in terms of, but if it is something that looks like it is a potential target, we generally meet with them in the planning process. Sometimes they ask us, sometimes we come to them.
Yeah, we're going to move on. We're going to move on from police at the moment.
Okay, other topics. Yes.
Mayor de Blasio, on Friday, acting HHC CEO Stanley Brezhnev sent a letter, knowing him all these years. I was surprised by the tenor of it. To Albany regarding some $389 million that you guys had counted on for medical services you provided last year that you counted as being good revenue for the current year, and yet Albany hasn't remitted that money. Subsequently, we've gotten a statement from the governor basically saying that there's such a crisis now because of what's happened in Washington that you should be looking at your surplus. Could you respond to that?
Yeah, there's just so many things wrong with what the governor has said here. So let's break it down in pieces. First of all, you're right about Stan Brezhnev. He's one of the most distinguished public servants in the recent history of this city, and it takes a lot to get Stan Brezhnev upset. He was appalled by what he saw because it deviated from the normal relationship between the state government and the city government that he has witnessed for decades. This is a deviation from the norm. There's been a lot of deviations from the norm in Albany. I would urge all of you to start looking more closely at how what we have considered to be good government and the normal way of doing things in the interest of the public has increasingly changed in recent years in Albany in ways that are detrimental to the people of this city and this state. So you're right. This is money that is owed to New York City. It's owed to our public hospitals that serve over 1 million New Yorkers. It's federal money earmarked for New York City. And then we provide matching funds. So withholding it helps no one. And the thing that everyone should be focused on right now is the underlying situation on the DISH program, getting it extended to protect not only our public hospitals, but our private hospitals as well. Now, let me give you the state of play on that. And that's where all the focus should be. Senator Schumer is leading the charge. I've spoken to him about it directly. This is a passionate focus of his. When Chuck Schumer focuses on something, big things happen. So I have great confidence in his ability to protect these resources for our hospitals, not just for New York City, for all over the country. In the House, literally in the last 24 hours, legislation passed out of committee in the House to protect these resources for our hospitals. So not only should all the focus be on addressing the root problem, but there's obvious evidence it can be addressed. For the governor to somehow say that the New York City hospitals should suffer in the meantime makes no sense. And I think a lot of New Yorkers are going to be very upset about that.
Into motion, ironically, because it was one of the unfortunate aspects of the Affordable Health Care Act. This is black letter law because the assumption from the Obama administration was that there'd be such a drop in people being uninsured that charity hospitals wouldn't need it. Isn't that?
There's no question. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The ACA, look, one thing I appreciate as a Democrat is I don't know a Democrat who says the ACA is perfect. I'm very comfortable saying it's not perfect. I think it was a huge step forward for healthcare in this country. I think it was far superior to what we had before, but it's far from perfect. We got a lot of work to do. And thanks to people like Senator McCain and Senator Collins, we may actually get to do that work in Washington, both parties working together on the things that need to be fixed. But this issue on DISH is one of the examples of something that was a flaw, the assumption that this money would no longer be needed, when in fact, all of our hospitals have so many uninsured people they're taking care of, particularly our public hospitals. So yeah, there is a flaw there, but that does not for a minute suggest the state shouldn't do its job and give New York City the money that was already allocated for it. So here's my advice to the governor. Focus on fixing the DISH problem with Senator Schumer, with the rest of us in Washington, because real progress is being made. Give our public hospitals the resources they had coming to them so we can serve the patients of New York City, and don't turn it into a political football. Yeah.
Later today, there's supposed to be an indictment unsealed. A number of city employees are accused of producing fake placards. I'm not sure if the NYPD was involved in this investigation. I don't think so.
Chief Boyce can speak to that.
I would like to know how and how this may affect NYPD enforcement. And Mr. Mayor, if you have any comment on that case.
Let Chief Boyce start.
Sure. The DOI is the primary investigator in that. We assisted because we have assets in the Department of Investigation. Those were bogus DOT plates. No one in city government is involved in that, from what I understand. Again, we're assisting the DOI, but what we know now is no one from city government is involved at all. These were bogus plates, and it's done primarily by Commissioner Peters.
Look, and
Placards, I'm sorry.
Right. First of all, I commend DOI. I'm glad they got these perpetrators, but it's a part of an ongoing effort to attack this problem on many fronts. And we're not going to tolerate misuse by city employees, and we're not going to tolerate private citizens who fabricate placards or misuse, anything in the way of trying to cheat the people of this city. So I think it's a good example of the fact that more and more enforcement is happening, and that anyone who inappropriately uses a placard or fabricates a placard will pay the price. Gloria.
Mr. Mayor, following up on the H&H situation, we've seen a similar narrative play out before. What are you going to do if the governor doesn't give the city this money that it is owed? Are you putting any kind of plans in place? This is going to force you to consider layoffs, considering the fiscal state of the public hospital system?
It's a dangerous action by the state. We can maintain stability for a period of time, but if the state deprives the city of federal funds on an ongoing basis, it will undermine health care in this city. And we'll have to take very substantial measures to address it. Again, this is federal money, not state money, federal money earmarked for New York City that we match with city dollars. There's no state money involved. All the state has to do is pass the federal money along, as it has for years and years and years. So that's why I'm saying this is not normal, and there's no excuse for it. And by the way, if the question is, something might happen someday on DISH, well, you don't penalize our public hospitals now for something that might happen someday. We need the resources to keep our public hospitals going now. We all know they've gone through tough fiscal times. I don't think the governor is saying he wants to undermine healthcare in New York City, but this action could do that. Again, this is a brand new development since Friday. We'll have more to say it as it emerges, but there's going to be a lot of people fighting against this. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, it's an article in the Daily News about you're eyeing the Queens Detention Center to reopen that as far as transferring prisoners from Rikers. Can you comment on that?
Well, I want to commend the council members who came forward and said proactively that they are ready to start the process to build that facility, add substantially to that facility, so it can be part of the solution at Rikers. I've said all along is just everyone needs to remember how things actually work in New York City. Action to build a new jail or to add to an existing one has to go through a vote of the city council. And everyone understands that the local council member has very important influence on the decision. So now we have a council member in writing, Karen Kozlowitz, to her great credit, along with surrounding council members from surrounding areas, saying this is the right thing to do. I think it's a really high road and noble act on their part to say, we understand that Rikers has to close. We want to be part of the solution. We're going to make it work. So I fully endorse that idea, and we're going to be working with other council members in other areas to have a similar outcome. Dave.
Got two questions. First, you've sort of accelerated the pace of your town halls that you're doing. You've done 5 since the primary. At what point does, sort of reaching out to your constituents blend into campaigning? And the second question is on the new corrections commissioner that you named today.
Well, let me just do the first one. The first one, we have scheduled them for the coming weeks and then into November and December, well past the point when there's any campaigning. I don't know if you've been to one. They are rigorous experiences where everyday New Yorkers can raise anything and everything. They're not gaudy campaign events. They are formal public events where the public gets to raise real concerns, and we try and provide real answers and real action. And I'm very committed. And as I like to say, if the people of New York City renew my employment contract, I look forward to having a town hall meeting in every council district in the next term as well.
On the corrections commissioner, did you offer the position to anyone outside of the corrections department?
No. The offer was made to acting Commissioner Brand because as we evaluated her work and talked through with her vision, I became convinced she was the right person for the job, and I'm very happy she accepted.
What was wrong with, you did a nationwide search, what was wrong with you?
Oh, I don't think it's about something being wrong. It's that we thought she combined alignment on vision with real experience in making the changes and reforms needed, and she had been part of some of the biggest successes we've seen so far in our jail system. She knew the job, she knew the system, she knew the people, and I liked her approach to leadership, and it just made sense to go forward with her. Yeah.
SCI released a report last week on Richard Berry's, help that he got from the DOE getting his kids in schools. And they confirmed that he met with the top 2 enrollment officials at Tweed. One of them called the principal of the school and said his son was a good fit. And then that same guy told Harmon's assistant that it was a done deal, yet they determined that there was no special treatment given. So I'm just curious, how many other parents have that kind of access to the top?
We've spoken to this. I'll speak to again. SCI is the ultimate word here. They found that things were handled appropriately. That's how it works. They get to look at a situation. They come to a judgment. They've come to a judgment. I have great faith in the deputy mayor. And as I said to you guys previously, for someone to have moved his entire family and dislocated his life to join in public service, taking a big pay cut, etc., was perfectly appropriate for him to have access to information to try and figure out how he could handle that transition. This report confirms it was done appropriately. Again, that's all I got to say. It was done appropriately. It was done appropriately.
Mr. Mayor, I wonder how you feel about your latest problems with the Italian-American community who have decided, many of whom have decided not to go to the event at Gracie Mansion on Italian heritage.
It's not the community, Marcia. There's 25 million Italian Americans and millions in the metropolitan area. It is a small group of leaders. That is their choice. I am a very, very proud Italian American. I think we all, as Italian Americans, think about our own family's history. And my grandparents came here with very little and lived the American dream. My mother spoke Italian before she spoke English. She learned English in school. She lived the American dream. I could not be more proud of my heritage. And we're having an event to celebrate that heritage, as we have every year. When I went to Italy about 6 months into my mayoralty, a lot of these same people recognized the depth of my feeling for my heritage and the fact that I was celebrating it. Look, it's a free country. If they choose not to come to an event honoring our heritage, that's their choice. But I'm very comfortable with the fact that we're going to have a great event with a lot of great people to honor what Italians have contributed to this city.
Will the decision to hold monetary help, $15,000, have any effect on
No.
the event? And are you disappointed by the way they're acting?
I'm never surprised when people, for their own political motivations, do something. I think the bottom line is this is an event on behalf of the entire city of New York to celebrate Italian heritage, like we have events every single month to celebrate all the people who make up this city. And I don't think it's something to politicize, but they have that right if that's what they want to do. Yeah.
Mayor, just
just to follow up on the new DOC commissioner, you know, a nationwide search, are you concerned at all about landing on someone who was involved in the same conduct that eventually led to the dismissal of Commissioner
It's just, respectfully, you know better than to ask the question that way. That is not what led to, you do. Come on, you know a lot. I know you have a family history understanding the agency. Commissioner Pont was not dismissed. Let's be clear. And it wasn't because of a mistake around some cars. Commissioner Pont had gotten to a point after years of service to the city and many, many years before that elsewhere that it was time for him to retire. So let's try and be accurate. He made a mistake. He acknowledged the mistake. He compensated the city for the mistake, as did other officials. And there was no negative intent. I said it then, I'll say it again. And we need people who can take on really, really tough jobs. This is a very tough and thankless job to be correction commissioner in New York City. But Commissioner Pont made a lot of progress, particularly in reducing the worst violence on Rikers and in ending punitive segregation for our younger inmates and in instituting reforms like training and education for inmates. And Commissioner Brand will continue that progress. That's what it's about.
If I could just ask, it seems like you have a cut on the bridge of your nose.
I do have a cut on the bridge of my nose. That's very observant. A keen observer of this was what we call a collision at first base. And it happens in softball. And so we're playing, it was a intra-team scrimmage. You know, the City Hall softball team has been looking for its previous opponents, the City Council and the City Hall News Corps, to come back and play, but apparently after previous defeats, those teams are no longer willing to step on the field with us. So we have continued to scrimmage and prepare for the eventual time when someone will step forward to compete with us.
Still work for the city?
Yeah. Yes, a fellow colleague, all in good fun. They are still working for the city. Everyone got back up. I was, after the incident, remembered the immortal words of Dante de Blasio when he played travel baseball, and he used to get banged up, and he said, what you do in a situation like this is you rub some dirt on it and you walk it off. So we all got back up and we kept playing. I did not see stars.
First, I need to disagree with the premise of your answer. We're willing to replay you in softball anytime.
Are you speaking officially for the press corps? That's so interesting that at the end of the season, suddenly this newfound interest. But we are ready. We're ready. We're more than ready. We've been practicing since April.
My question is, yesterday talking with Public Advocate James about a whole lot of things, she said that on affordable housing, the city's relationship with the state is hurting the city, that the city needs a better relationship with the state on housing, and that has hurt the city. And part two of that was that the city needs to think even bigger over the next 4 years if reelected, that the city needs to think even bigger about a building program, a new affordable housing building program. I'm wondering if that resonates with you on either front.
I think the intention of the second piece is good, to say we've got to constantly do more because we understand this affordability crisis is beyond anything we've ever seen and could even imagine. I go to the town hall meetings, and it's the number one issue people raise. And, you know, it's really telling that you tell people we're in the middle of a successful program to create enough affordable housing for 500,000 people. But the need is so great that, you know, folks are still not feeling it enough. You know, I've met plenty of people who got affordable housing through our program already, and the ones I meet who got it, you know, their lives are changed, but there's still so many people waiting. So there's no question we have to keep looking for what more we can do. At this point, you know, the program we have in place is beyond anything that people thought was conceivable. I mean, I remember when we announced it, a lot of experts thought it was this close to insane, and I'm happy to say it is on budget and ahead of schedule. So we're certainly going to look for where we can go further in the future. On the first point, I think it is a little idealistic to say, oh, if only everyone would just cooperate, the world would be a beautiful place. That would be great. But we also have eyes to see. You know, I don't sit around expecting the Republican Congress to suddenly call me up one day and say, you know, Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan to say, hey, we haven't really done enough for you guys. What can we do? Likewise, I'd like to see the governor focus more on actually delivering on affordable housing for New York City. There's been some big pronouncements, but I haven't seen a lot of delivery, and we need it. So I don't think it's about relationship. I think it's about everyone doing their job and living up to their commitments. And, you know, my job, I've said it to you guys before, my job is to hold people to their commitments and be an agent of accountability when it comes to the needs of New York City.
Last two.
Let him follow.
Just quickly, the idea of sort of refashioning and thinking bigger about the building aspect, the new affordable housing, that's not something on your radar at this time.
It's. I'd say it differently. We look for every opportunity, and we are constantly asking ourselves, can we, in some way, improve upon the existing effort? You know, we moved $2 billion to lower the income levels and to focus more on senior housing. So that was a revision we made in June. We're going to keep looking for opportunities to revise. I think if someone said, hey, you know, could we do a vast new building program on top of what we're already having, I would ask them, how on earth are we going to do that with the resources we have and no federal aid or state aid on the way? I mean, again, let's be honest about this. There's no scenario for new federal housing aid, you know, in the next, let's say before the next presidential election. Because I think we can all see, even if there was some, from my point of view, improvement in the congressional situation, it will not be enough to lead to a recommitment of the federal government to housing. So we're probably stuck right now through 2020 with effectively no new housing aid from Washington. And then the state really hasn't delivered on any of the programs they said they were going to create for us. So we're on our own, anxious to do more. But I don't know where the resources would be for something really big at this point. We'll keep looking for them, though. Yeah. I'll do a few more.
Sure. Mayor, you issued a report today on the Paris Climate Accords in New York City, trying to stay in line with it. Can you elaborate on the select bus service goals and, you know, what you see and when you see delivering those?
I can't give you a lot of detail. I'll be happy to after I talk to my colleagues, but I can say it has been an unquestioned success. This is sort of the quiet success that people should pay more attention to, in my view. Select bus service really is popular. And we got a lot of what we wanted to do in the first 4 years done, not everything. But I don't want to say there's limitless potential, but there's a huge amount of potential going forward. And it's something we will continue to invest in. So I can go over more details as I get more information from the team. But the bottom line is this one's just filled with potential. This could be a really powerful piece, particularly connecting areas of the outer boroughs that have been underserved.
Follow up, since the governor does control the MTA, what can the city do?
I like the framing of your question.
Thank you. First time.
I've been polling people at town hall meetings. I want to thank the media for being agents of truth and light, because with every successive town hall meeting, I give people an open-ended question, does the state or the city control the MTA? And it is every single meeting, more and more people are just raising their hands, state right off the bat. The truth has come out. Continue.
What can the city do with select bus service versus what the state has to authorize?
Look, this has been very cooperative, and in the vein of, you know, a model of how we could proceed positively, this has been a great example, and I commend the MTA. They know it's a huge amount of value added, but they also know they need our partnership and our resources, our capital resources, and our agencies to be involved to make it work. And there's been a beautiful progression of line after line coming up and running, and then the next one, the next one, the next one. So yes, it can be done, and we intend to keep that progress going. And it's been a real bright spot in the relationship with the MTA.
Kind of relatedly, the climate plan includes or makes references to changes to state policy. The millionaire's tax you talk about, allowing the city to connect to solar renewable power grids upstate. To what extent is the plan reliant on changes to state policy, and how do you expect to achieve those goals, all of them, given the political obstacles that you?
Sure. There's a substantial need for changes in state policy. I can't give you a percentage or anything, but yeah, we really do need some state policy changes to achieve everything we need to achieve. It's not shocking. You're talking about not just going for the 2-degree increase goal that's in the Paris Agreement, but going for the even higher goal that it's sort of its optimal goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's very, very ambitious. So clearly, the city will need help to get that done. But it can be done. I'm very confident. And look, again, I have my differences with the leadership in Albany, but on moving to address climate change, there's been a lot of really good policies by this governor and this legislature. So I'm very hopeful that there'll be a lot of cooperation going forward. I think it's an area where people share a goal.
You mentioned that in the plan, the city's operations would convert to completely renewable, sustainable energy. Does that include city vehicles? Would you guys be looking to convert the city's fleet to all electric cars or something?
We've already said that for non-emergency vehicles, they're going to all electric. And we put an asterisk on for certain emergency vehicles that may, for the foreseeable future, have to be gasoline powered. But the technology is leaping forward. I only began to read the article in the Times yesterday or today about the automobile industry recognizing that the market dynamics are shifting so radically that they're going to put more and more of their efforts into electric. The more they do that, the more they'll create higher performance vehicles that will work for emergency services as well. So I'm very hopeful on that trajectory. So we'll keep a carve out for the short term for certain vehicles that must be gasoline powered. But look, I think when you think about it, we can systematically wean ourselves off of fossil fuel in this city. We're going to need help authorizing some of those sources, as you indicated, but it can be done. And it's happening in a lot of other advanced industrial societies, and there's going to be, I think, a real hue and cry in this city for us to keep moving in that direction. So that's our goal.
Blasio, in light of your lapel pin, and also
Yes.
we know that there's a tremendous number of New York City first responders going to
Yes,
Puerto
there
Rico. Could we get a little bit behind the scenes? What's involved there? What kind of numbers do you have? And this is a personal sacrifice. I mean, it's kind of like in the abstract we see a picture, but these individuals are it comes to some personal consequence to their family.
Sure.
If some of the NYPD folks could flesh that out a bit for us, it would be helpful.
I'll start and pass to the commissioner and my colleagues. So we got about 150 New York City personnel in Puerto Rico right now. And there's been a very cooperative relationship with FEMA. And we've obviously put a special focus on the city of San Juan, which is a sister city to New York, if ever there was one. And we have particularly focused on helping San Juan to create an emergency operations center, very much like what we have here. And I commend Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz for all she has done. And I said it before, but I will note again, the last thing she needs is the President of the United States criticizing her or her people while they're dealing with a crisis. I think she's been a great example of a hands-on leader solving very, very difficult problems. So our folks down there have done an amazing job. They have been selfless. They have sacrificed to go down there, but they did it willingly. The team at City Hall has put a lot of energy into making that work, and we're ready to respond to any request from FEMA. And obviously, the team at City Hall, working with NYPD and FDNY, have put together a huge collection drive for resources for Puerto Rico, which has been overwhelmingly successful. All of that will have to deepen because this crisis, now we're seeing the full images. Puerto Rico is not going to be fully up and on its feet for several years, from what I can see. And so we have a special obligation, given the city's almost 1/10 Puerto Rican and the intense ties we have to Puerto Rico. We have a special obligation to be there for them for the long haul. Commissioner?
Just, I get probably at least 4 or 5 times a day, I get an update from Chief Giordano, who's in charge of emergency services. And that's his people are down with the FEMA team. And just yesterday, they went out to a village that was cut off due to an overflowing stream. They had to assemble a cable system and a rubber raft and get not just food and water over to them. They had to get prescription medicine over to them. And this is the work they've been engaged in for quite a long time now, not just in Puerto Rico. They went down to Florida. They went to Houston. So it is at a great sacrifice. Some of these men and women haven't seen their family for quite a long time. We also have people from the Hispanic Association, the Hispanic Society, that went down with OEM, with Commissioner Esposito's people, and they're down in San Juan now. And there are more and more people looking to go, but we just have to make sure that they're properly supported down there.
That's right. Thanks, everyone.